I would appraise this book actually at about $40,000.
Rebecca Romney seemed like the perfect rare book expert on Pawn Stars. Calm, smart, and trusted by Rick Harrison himself. But in 2014, everything changed. A stolen book worth $40,000 appeared on the show. Then the FBI stepped in and questioned Rebecca about how stolen books made it onto national TV. By January 2015, she vanished from the show without explanation. No goodbye, no official statement. Today, we're uncovering what really happened behind the cameras and why the truth was buried for so long. Rebecca Romney was born on April 6, 1985, in the warm desert city of Phoenix, Arizona. Back then, nothing about her life pointed toward rare books or million-dollar manuscripts. In fact, she once joked that old books were boring relics for old men. Her dream was to become a philosopher, or maybe a translator. She loved languages, ideas, and deep conversations, things that had nothing to do with the auction world she would one day dominate. At 18, she went to college thinking she'd spend her life in classrooms. By 22, she had mastered 5.5 languages: English, French, Japanese, Latin, Ancient Greek, and even some Old English. She taught herself by studying for 12 hours a day. She once translated a 300 BC Greek papyrus for a university exam, and aced it. Professors were shocked, and her skills would later help her uncover forgeries that could have cost collectors millions. Between 2003 and 2007, she studied philosophy and classical studies at Brigham Young University. While her classmates were choosing safer majors, Rebecca was busy debating free will in 4-hour seminars and decoding ancient texts in their original forms. She took extra classes, pulled off a perfect GPA, and graduated with honors. Her thesis involved comparing 2nd century Greek fragments of Plato's Republic. Nobody knew it then, but this strange mix of philosophy and ancient language was preparing her for something incredible. In 2007, just after graduation, she made a mistake that changed her life. Rebecca applied for what she thought was a basic management job at Bowman Rare Books in Philadelphia. But when she walked into the interview, she realized she'd misunderstood the job posting. It was for a rare book specialist, something she knew nothing about. She almost walked out. Instead, she stayed, admitted she had no experience, and got the job anyway. Her language skills caught their attention, and that was enough. Within months, she was handling books worth more than most homes. A Shakespeare folio from 1623, a page from the Gutenberg Bible, first editions of Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica. She was thrown into a world where one mistake could cost a fortune. By 2010, just 3 years later, she was promoted to gallery manager in Las Vegas. She was 26. By 2013, at age 29, she became the youngest senior director in the company's history. That role gave her control over catalogs, auctions, and private sales totaling over $10 million a year. One of her clients paid $300,000 for a book printed in 1472. And she wasn't just good at selling. She was uncovering fakes no one else could spot. Rick Harrison didn't find Rebecca Romney through a casting call. He already knew her. Back in 2007, she joined Bowman Rare Books when they opened a location in Las Vegas. By 2010, she was running the place. Rick had been running gold and silver pawn since 1989, and the world of rare books and antiques in Vegas wasn't that big. Their paths crossed at local events, through mutual contacts, and through a shared obsession with history. So, when Rick needed someone who truly understood old paper, not just books, but documents, signatures, handwriting, he didn't ask producers to find an expert. He picked up the phone and called her. That call led to her first appearance on Pawns Stars in 2011, not as a hired TV personality, but as someone already trusted off camera. Their friendship grew after filming. They even went on double dates, and fans had no idea that the calm, smart book expert on screen wasn't just a good fit. She was handpicked. When she stepped in front of the camera for the first time in season 4, on April 4th, 2011, she was handed a stack of Civil War-era papers, Among them was a Confederate bond from 1861 that could be worth $5,000 if real. She examined the paper texture, the ink, even the way it had been printed. In less than 10 minutes, she exposed a forged signature that dropped the value from $10 grand to a few $100. Viewers were glued to the screen. She spoke with confidence, quietly cross-checking details while cameras rolled. By the end of the episode, she wasn't just another guest expert. She was the book lady, and she stole the show. Ratings jumped by 15%. From that point on, if the pawn shop got anything made of paper, books, letters, historical documents, Rebecca was the one they called. Between 2011 and 2020, she appeared in around 30 episodes, with her most active run happening in the first 4 years. In that time, she appraised everything from a $2,000 replica of a 1493 Columbus letter to an original broadside of the Declaration of Independence worth $15,000. In 2013, she stunned everyone by authenticating what turned out to be notes linked to Edgar Allan Poe, hidden inside a manuscript thought to be worthless. She even handled 19th century slave trade papers and explained how to place a value on something so deeply tied to pain and history. By 2014, she was doing nearly 3/4 of the show's paper-related appraisals. Some of her calls were hard. She once debunked a fake Shakespeare folio that someone believed was worth 10 grand. It wasn't. What made her stand out wasn't just what she knew, it was how she delivered it. Rebecca never raised her voice. She never looked rattled. She could drop a bombshell, like revealing that a $50,000 book was part of a forgery ring from the 1800s, and still sound like she was calmly explaining what's for lunch. That became her thing. While other experts made a show of their excitement, she kept everything steady and clear. In 2012, Chumley almost lost his job over a book he bought without checking anything. He paid $500 for a signed copy of Charles Lindbergh's 1927 autobiography, which he then called Mark Lindbergh by mistake. Everyone in the shop thought it was fake. Rick even said if the signature didn't check out, Chumley's next day off would be permanent. Rebecca Romney stepped in again. She pulled out a verified copy and compared the signature, pointing out how Lindbergh had changed his autograph style as he became more famous. Turns out, it was real. She valued it at $1,500, triple the price Chumley had paid. Not only was it a solid profit, it also saved Chumley from being fired. One tiny signature turned a near disaster into one of his rare wins. Another time, someone came in with what looked like Revolutionary War bonds, claiming they were worth a fortune. But when Rebecca took a closer look, the truth was far stranger. These weren't revolutionary, they were Confederate, and they weren't just rare. They were missing. These documents had vanished after the Civil War ended in 1865. They were linked to stolen Southern assets that were loaded onto the USS Republic, a ship that sank in a hurricane that same year. The wreck was discovered in 2003, and by 2005, some of its corroded contents had been recovered. These bonds were part of that history, potentially worth $50,000, but they also came with legal baggage. Selling stolen items could land the shop in court. Police got involved. Rebecca's careful research kept the shop from buying something that might have turned into a lawsuit, proving that sometimes history comes with consequences. Then there was the time someone thought they'd hit the jackpot with a Shakespeare First folio from 1623. Real copies of that book have sold for millions. One even fetched $9,000 million in 2020. The seller's copy looked impressive, but when Rebecca examined it, the flaws started to show. The paper didn't age right, the ink looked too clean, and it was missing tiny flaws that real 400-year-old books always have. She believed it was a fake, possibly inspired by the so-called false folio of 1619, a misleading collection made by William Jagard and Thomas Pavier. Even those are valuable, but this one wasn't close. If Rick had bought it, the shop could have lost thousands. Her sharp eyes saved them from making one of the costliest mistakes in Pawn Stars history. But sometimes the items were as real as they come, and just as powerful. That's what happened when someone brought in a first edition of On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. The book came out on November 24th, 1859, and it sold out on its first day. Only 250 copies were printed. Rebecca took one look at the green cloth binding, the diagrams, and the ads dated June 1859, and she knew it was authentic. She valued it at $75,000. The impact of Darwin's book couldn't be overstated. It reshaped science and religion forever. Even Copernicus and Newton hadn't caused such a shock. Some copies, especially those with Darwin's personal notes, have sold for over $500,000. Later editions aren't nearly as valuable. For example, the 1862 edition, where Darwin removed his odd whale bear story, is only worth around $9. Officially, it was for a promotion. She left the Las Vegas gallery behind and became senior director at Bowman Rare Books, handling library acquisitions and catalogs. She later worked in Brooklyn and eventually settled in Washington, D.C., where she co-founded a new rare book company. So yes, there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for her departure, but the timing still raised eyebrows. Why did the move come just months after the Book of Mormon scandal? Was it really just career growth, or was something else going on behind closed doors? By 2022, fans got a brief glimpse of her again. In a special episode of Pawn Stars Do America, she rejoined the crew in Washington, D.C. and appraised another pirate book. Her chemistry with the team hadn't changed. She teased Chumley, joked with Corey, but it only made her long disappearance more confusing. In 2016, Rebecca Romney married a man who shared her love for books, J.P. Romney, an author and historical researcher. What made the story even more unusual was that J.P. had family ties to one of the biggest names in American politics. He was distantly related to Mitt Romney, the man who ran for president in 2012 and pulled in nearly half the nation's votes. Through this marriage, Rebecca found herself loosely connected to a dynasty that included former Michigan Governor George Romney, who held office from 1963 to 1969. But despite all these links, she's never met Mitt Romney. The connection was real, but distant, more name than relationship. At the time, her fame from Pawn Stars was still fresh. She had been on the show from 2011 to 2015, even once appraising a rare 1507 map worth $1 million. But by 2023, the marriage had ended. JP was now her ex-husband, and fans began speculating whether politics had ever played a role in her journey. Rebecca, however, insisted her path in the world of rare books was entirely her own. The year after her marriage, she and JP co-wrote a book that took everyone by surprise. Printer's Error. Irreverent Stories from Book History was published on a whim. March 14, 2017. It wasn't just a light read across 368 pages. The book uncovered strange, forgotten moments from printing history, stories about forged copies of Galileo's work, Charles Dickens's war for copyright in the 1840s, and even the mystery behind the Gutenberg Bible, printed in 1455, which never actually mentioned Gutenberg by name. Only 48 copies of that Bible still exist, each worth tens of millions. The book mixed Rebecca's real-world expertise with JP's storytelling, and it worked. Critics praised it, sales were strong, and it gave her something few reality TV stars ever manage: a respected voice beyond the screen. That same year, Rebecca was still remembered for her 2013 Pawn Stars appraisal of a $100,000 Shakespeare folio, and JP had just published his own novel, The Monster on the Road Is Me. Together, the project marked a creative high point, but it also became one of their last public collaborations. Despite the public curiosity around her marriage and its political ripple effects, Rebecca has drawn a firm line. She almost never speaks about the Romney name. In a 2023 interview, she said plainly that she's never even met Mitt. The distance, both personal and professional, couldn't be clearer. She has 2 children, but no names or ages are public. And, while she keeps the Romney name professionally, fans have noticed how little she's willing to say. In a fan Q&A, she brushed off questions about fame and relationships. The only time her personal life came into focus was during the release of Printer's Error, and even then, it was about the work, not the marriage. She went on to edit a science fiction anthology called Projections in 2020, and made sure the spotlight, stayed on the stories, not her. Some believe the silence is a way to avoid political baggage, especially in a world where rare books can bring her into contact with collectors from all walks of life. Rebecca Romney didn't just leave reality TV. She left it with a plan. In 2019, after years on Pawn Stars, she co-founded a rare book firm called Type Punch Matrix in Silver Spring, Maryland. This wasn't just some cute antique shop tucked into a corner. It was a statement. Alongside her partner, Brian Cassidy, she built a business that broke every mold in the antiquarian world. Their inventory wasn't just expensive, it was bold. Shakespeare folios, Gutenberg Bible leaves, and titles that weren't just rare, but radical. Within a year, they were selling to elite clients, moving pieces worth hundreds of thousands, even millions. And in a field mostly run by older men, Rebecca stood out, sharp, vocal, and unafraid to challenge the rules. But her rebellion started before that. In 2017, she and Heather O'Donnell created the Honey and Wax Book Collecting Prize. $1,000 every year to women under 30, who had put together the most original, surprising book collections. They didn't care how much the books cost. They cared how much they meant. A tattoo artist won in 2023 with Hybrid Botanical Works. A national security analyst won in 2024 with a military-themed set. Rebecca had noticed something unsettling. Women were passionate about collecting, but hesitant to call themselves collectors. This prize changed that. Backed by Biblio and Christie's, it gave them visibility, confidence, and a real place in the rare book world. By 2025, it had honored 9 women and inspired countless more. That same year, something else changed. Rebecca released Jane Austen's bookshelf on February 18, 2025. It wasn't just a book, it was a literary bombshell. It tore into what she called the Great Forgetting, the way women writers who shaped Austen's world were erased from history. Frances Burney, Anne Radcliffe, Charlotte Smith. These women were once best-selling names with print runs in the thousands. Now most of their work is out of print. Rebecca dug deep, revealing that only 10 to 15% of 18th century novels by women survive today, compared to 40% for men. She didn't just name the problem. She showed the proof, book by book, number by number, and readers listened. The New York Times called it sharp and fearless. The Washington Post said it was thrilling. The Guardian called it instinctive and electric. In just a few weeks, it sold over 20,000 copies. And what shocked people most? Rebecca admitted she hadn't heard of most of the women she was writing about. Not during her degree, not even during her time as a rare book dealer. She'd read the men, Richardson Fielding, but she'd never read Charlotte Lennox or Maria Edgeworth, even though Austen had. That realization hit her hard. Her entire education had quietly erased these voices, and if someone like her hadn't seen it, how many others had missed it too? So, she started collecting. In 2015, she began searching for original editions by the women who shaped Austen. Frances Burney's Evelina from 1778, Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho from 1794, Charlotte Smith's Emmeline from 1788. These weren't easy to find. Many were lost or dismissed as sentimental or frivolous because they were written by women. She flew to auctions, hunted through estates, and once battled bidders for a 1759 copy of The Female Quixote by Charlotte Lennox. By 2025, her collection had grown to over 50 rare books, each one a resurrection. She didn't just stop at collecting, she used those books as evidence. She tracked how many were printed, how many survived, how critics treated them. She found that women's books were far less likely to be saved, reprinted, or taught in schools. Even though Radcliffe helped inspire Poe, Shelley, and the entire Gothic tradition, her work was left out of the canon. Frances Burney sold 3,000 copies in the 18th century, but disappeared by 1850, and Charlotte Smith's poetry helped shape Wordsworth's career. Yet, she faded into near silence. Rebecca used these patterns to show how sexism wasn't just in reviews. It was baked into the survival of literature itself. Rebecca Romney's story doesn't begin in an old library. It begins under the neon lights of a Las Vegas pawn shop, where she first appeared as a rare book expert on television. But somehow, that unlikely beginning took her into the most exclusive rooms in American bibliophilia. One of them is the Grolier Club in New York. Founded in 1884, it's the oldest and most elite society of book collectors in the country. Only 825 people worldwide can call themselves members. And yet, in May 2025, Rebecca will be there delivering a lecture titled Jane Austen's Bookshelf, Collecting as Investigation. That talk began with a single moment in 2023 when she stumbled across a Victorian edition of Evelina by Frances Burney. That book changed everything. It led her down a path of uncovering the women who once inspired Austen, but were mostly erased from the canon. She isn't just telling literary history, she's actively rewriting it. Since 2015, she's also been a pillar of the antiquarian book seminars. Every year, more than 100 aspiring rare book dealers gather to learn from her. She tells them the truths most never hear, that the rare book world isn't always pure. She speaks openly about the Thomas J. Wise forgeries of the 1930s, a scandal involving more than 50 fake first editions that fooled experts for decades. She shows how collecting isn't just about owning, it's about uncovering. Her lessons go deeper than market value. They reveal the hidden fingerprints of authors forgotten by history. One of those authors was Burney, whose 1778 novel sold 500 copies in its first run, and helped lay the foundation for Pride and Prejudice. Rebecca's work is the reason people are beginning to recognize that. She's also changing how rare books are authenticated. In 2019, she co-founded Type Punch Matrix, but it wasn't just another book firm. By 2023, she was using AI and blockchain to authenticate provenance with a test case involving a $50,000 Sylvia Plath manuscript. The software could trace ownership back to 1956. This leap wasn't accidental. It grew out of the frauds exposed in her 2017 book, Printer's Error, which dove into the history of forged books like the fake Gutenberg Bibles of the 1840s. By 2022, she was working with tech firms to build tools most collectors could only dream of. These included spectral ink scanners that can detect forgeries with 95% accuracy, things even the human eye would miss. In 2024, one of these tools uncovered a forged Columbus letter from 1493. And she didn't keep these tools locked away. She brought them into her seminars. Over 200 dealers learned how to use them in the past year alone. Techniques once confined to the Smithsonian were suddenly in everyone's hands. She even started working on VR simulations that allow people to handle rare books digitally without ever touching the real thing. It's not just preservation, it's transformation. But her ambition didn't stop there. By 2025, she's expanding Type Punch Matrix into museum consulting. From a humble $100,000 startup in 2019, the company has now appraised over 1,000 rare items worth more than $10 million. One of those was a 16th century manuscript shown at the Boston Book Fair in 2023. Another was a lightning fast sale in 2022, when she helped the Lilly Library acquire 2,000 romance novels for $250,000 in just 16 hours, a record in the field. These aren't just business wins, they're statements. Her consulting now focuses on getting overlooked voices into institutional collections. In 2024, she helped curate an exhibit spotlighting 18th century Black writers. Her team in Silver Spring, Maryland, now includes 10 people. If her consulting model succeeds, it could bring in $2 million a year through museum partnerships alone.